What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Kings Court with me, It's a Miracle, here for Fansided.com, GoldenGateSports.com, and of course, SatKingsNation.com. So be sure to go to all three of those websites for all your daily Kings news. And joining us for the first time on this show, we've had his partner James Ham on countless times. The other half of the Cowbell Kingdom podcast, Jonathan Santiago. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.
So I want to kind of just jump right into this because there's so much to cover, especially since we haven't had a guest on in a little while since the draft. So let's jump into Summer League first before we get into the draft, before we get into Isaiah Thomas. So there's been a couple of invitees here now, like Sim Bhullar, there's been Marshawn Brooks, and there's going to be that battle between Ben McLemore. I kind of want to get your take on some of these invitees because I just read your article earlier this afternoon about some of these people that have come in that are just kind of been invited to be on the team. And give me like your top three prospects and your takes on each one of them.
Yeah, I did write that this morning for Cowbell Kingdom. Obviously, you kind of have to start with Sim because the guy is 7'5" and he weighs almost 400 pounds. He's a very interesting prospect. Just questions about his conditioning, obviously, how that will translate to the next level. And, he does fit the bill for what they need. They are looking for a rim protector. But at the same time, I think he's a guy who's probably a little bit ways away in terms of, helping a team and even possibly making an NBA roster. Marshawn Brooks, another interesting guy, very good scorer, but, takes ill-advised shots, doesn't play much defense. But he's an interesting guy to watch, considering that the Kings do have Nick Stauskas and Ben McLemore in the fold there. I think maybe Marshawn looks at this as an opportunity to show that, hey, if I can beat out two guys who were lottery picks in the last 2 years, I might be able to get a pretty good job somewhere else. Rashad James is another interesting guy. He was with the Reno Bighorns, the Kings D-League affiliate, and speaking to some guys who are with Rashad in Reno, they talk about him having a lot of upside as a defender and that he was a very hard worker. So he's an interesting guy in that regard. A little bit undersized shooting guard that is trying to work on becoming more of a point guard at the next level. But, the folks up in Reno were very high on him. You also have Dwayne Jones, who's an interesting guy. He spent some time with Michael Malone and Chris Gent out in Cleveland. But, I would say that, the guys that I would look out for basically are Sim and Marshawn Brooks. Basically because, again, Sim with his size and Marshawn just getting to see what he can do in terms of pushing, the Kings' young two guards and Nick Stauskas and Ben McLemore.
I kind of want to keep hitting on a little bit more with Sim here because, like you said, he's 7'5". Like, he's a giant. I think you said it in your article the other day. He's a mountain man.
Yeah.
But the Kings just lost Aaron Gray. He signed I think a 4-year deal with the Pistons, and now who's their backup center? I mean, they kind of have that need for it. I mean, is there a chance just because of the need that the Kings have at that position that Sim makes this roster?
Yeah, I don't know. I think. I mean, I could potentially see him as a training camp invite. I don't know if he would necessarily make the roster. For me, even me, I got to see what this kid can do in Summer League, once it tips off on Friday. I want to see where his conditioning level is at. I think that there are other options out there in terms of potential backup centers. And even right now, as the roster currently stands, I think you got to go with Jason Thompson as your backup center as is. So I don't know if necessarily he would be a guy who you'd say we're signing him as an undrafted free agent and he's gonna be a player that may see time for us this year because again there are a lot of questions about his conditioning level and whether or not he has the fitness level to play in the NBA at this point.
All right, I want to kind of move on to the next topic, but again, right before we move into the bigger topics of what everyone really wants to hear about, which is the Isaiah Thomas and Nick Stauskas stuff, which is free agency. And, the Kings really just signed Darren Collison, and there's kind of been this notion, if you read some of the pieces that come out, is that he has the idea that he's going to be the starting point guard. And yet, again, there has been no word on what Isaiah Thomas is going to do. A lot of people think that he may be going on his way out, especially since how close the Kings are to the cap. But do you see? I mean, what's your thought on Darren Collison for one? And then do you see the Kings going after any other free agents that are still available out there?
Well, I like Darren Collison as a backup point guard. I don't like him as a starting point guard, and I think you ask a lot of Kings fans out there, they feel the exact same way. There are other people out there who may think differently, and it's kind of been frustrating to see that he's been portrayed as a pass-first point guard by some, but he's not that. He is a scoring point guard. In fact, I mean,
No, he's not.
if you look at Isaiah Thomas and Darren Collison, I mean, they do kind of the same things on the court. The only difference, well, the major difference is being that Darren Collison is 6 feet tall and he's not as good of a scorer as Isaiah Thomas. So I like Darren Collison if he's coming in to be your backup point guard. And I could even see a scenario in which, Darren Collison is here and then you re-sign Isaiah Thomas and you have Isaiah Thomas come off the bench and be your sixth man in name, but he would obviously get the bulk of the minutes at point guard. I'm okay with that, but if the Kings are planning to go into the season with Darren Collison as their starting point guard, they've just downgraded in talent, and that's not, that's contrary to what Pete D'Alessandro has been saying all along, since taking over as GM of the Sacramento Kings, and it's that they need talent, and if you let Isaiah Thomas go, and you're looking at Darren Collison to be your starting point guard, I don't know how you're a better basketball team, this going into this year versus last year.
Yeah, see, we kind of just touched on Darren Collison the last episode that we had, and you're preaching to the choir here. I don't think that Darren Collison is any better than Isaiah Thomas. I think maybe he has a little bit more grit defensively just because of his size and what he does on the floor. But I mean, other than that, I see them as the exact same player. I mean, we brought up a statistic on the show is that there's a 50% chance that he's going to turn over the ball. So for every 2 assists, he's turning over that basketball, which is kind of right there in that same scenario with Isaiah Thomas. So you're really just downgrading as a scorer when you get Darren Collison, in my opinion. But moving on here, I wanted to see also what other free agents are possibly out there because I did see your article on centers that could be available, but. Can you just refresh and touch up on that, on what you wrote about, there's these centers that could still be available that can help the Kings out if they decide to go after them during free agency?
Yeah, free agency though, it's tough though. I mean, one of the things that I did note in that piece is that they wouldn't have a ton of money to spend unless they're going to use a stretch provision on players like Jason Terry or Derek Williams or Travis Outlaw. I mean, right now, the new NBA salary cap was just announced today, and the Kings would be roughly $3.3 million under the luxury tax line, and the Kings don't want to cross that threshold. And they can actually cross it. They just need to be underneath it by the end of the regular season so that they don't receive a luxury tax bill. But the choices are very slim on the free agent market. I mean, you do have Ed Davis out there who, kind of fits the bill, the mold for what I think people feel would be a good fit next to DeMarcus Cousins, a long, rangy big man who can, block shots, defend, complement Cousins in that regard. Ekpe Udoh, another guy who, is a shot blocker, pretty solid defender. Emeka Okafor is kind of my, under the radar type free agent that I think they might want to kick the tires on. The question I have about Okafor though is, does he still want to play basketball? I've heard things in the past about the guy that he doesn't necessarily have the greatest desire to play basketball, and he obviously did not, fulfill his potential as the next Alonzo Mourning. But if he does want to play basketball, I could see him being a pretty decent fit next to DeMarcus Cousins as another shot blocking big man. And Greg Oden, they kicked the tires on him last year, and I don't know if Miami is interested in bringing him back, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Sacramento Kings decided to make another low risk buy or a low risk attempt at trying to get Greg Oden to come to Sacramento.
Yeah, my favorite play that you mentioned out of all those, especially while reading it, was Ed Davis. I mean, I saw him playing with the Toronto Raptors with him and Amir Johnson. He was showing tons of potential just as a starter. So, I mean, if the Kings can get somewhere in that area, me as a fan as well as, covering them for all those sites is that's one player I could really see on this Kings team and making an impact next to Cousins. But let's go ahead and move on to some of the bigger things that are going on now. The NBA draft has just passed, and the Kings just signed Nick Stauskas to his rookie contract. What are your thoughts on Nick Stauskas, and what do you think he can bring to this team right away?
Well, from the jump, you got to look at his shooting. I mean, that's something the Kings really needed last year. They traded away all their shooters. You lose Jimmer Fredette, you lose Marcus Thornton. I mean, he wasn't even giving anything to you throughout the season. Ben McLemore was not able to hit a shot. This team desperately needed shooting last year to space the floor and make things easier for DeMarcus Cousins, Rudy Gay, and Isaiah Thomas. So I can see him adding that. Obviously, him being a ball handler as well from the two-guard spot. That's why I kind of like his fit next to potentially Isaiah Thomas if he does stay in Sacramento, because if you have Stauskas there on the floor with Isaiah Thomas, you could see Isaiah Thomas playing off the ball a little bit and having Nick kind of run the offense from time to time. He's an interesting player. I kind of see, if we're looking at high upside here in terms of what type of player he could become. I kind of see him fitting the same mold as like the James Hardens or Manu Ginobili's of the league. I know there's a comparison to Klay Thompson, but I think he's a much better ball handler than Klay Thompson was coming out of college. But obviously the shooting comparison is there between those two players. So I wasn't totally high on the pick. And I found it interesting. I'm sure you caught the Grantland pieces on being in their draft room, and the Kings had opportunities to trade that pick. I mean, there's no question in my mind that they could have traded the pick to get the Bulls picks, which were dealt to Denver, the 16th and 19th pick. They had an offer on the table with the Philadelphia 76ers to get the 10th pick and 2 second-round picks. We'll see. Time will only tell if Nick Stauskas was really worth sacrificing all those picks or adding more depth to this team. But they seem to be very high on him, man. I think that the Kings really think that he can come in right away, and it wouldn't surprise me if they think a lot. They think more highly of him than Ben McLemore at this point.
Okay, which brings me straight to that leeway of the next question I have for you, which is you keep bringing up his ball handling. A lot of people bring up that, he has nice vision off pick and roll. So is there a chance during this summer league play, during training camp, and even possible times during the regular season where you're going to start seeing Nick Stauskas as possibly running the point position because of the skill set that he brings?
Yeah, I mean, as is right now, when you have Darren Collison right now as your starting point guard, Darren Collison was successful last year and successful in the past playing off of another point guard. He played off of Chris Paul last year in Los Angeles at times, and I could definitely see that being the case in Sacramento, where Collison and Stauskas are on the court together. I mean, that could potentially be the Kings starting backcourt next year, and they might see a lot of time together. So there will be times where I think the Kings will utilize his ability, especially to run the pick and roll or pick and pop with DeMarcus Cousins. He is very good at running that in Michigan, and now with a much more talented target in the middle in DeMarcus Cousins, I think you could see that utilized more by him at the next level. But as far as him playing a ton of minutes at point guard, I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't kind of say that he's going to be, playing major minutes at the point guard position, but playing some at the point, yeah, I could see that happening this year.
Okay, so now there's going to bring up Ben McLemore, and I feel like Summer League is going to be basically round one of their battle to see who's going to be that starting two. And, I mean, I want to know your opinion, John, does Ben McLemore get that starting position because he's still developing, he did finish strong, especially against Phoenix in that very last game, but Is he, really fighting to be the Kings starter and, stay in that rotation? I think he's going to stay in the rotation, but just personally as a starter, do you think Ben McLemore is going to get that job automatically, or is he fighting to get that job between him and Nick Stauskas?
Oh, he's fighting to get that job for sure. I mean, I think there's some folks in the Kings organization who believe that Nick Stauskas would start on the majority of teams in the NBA right now. So I think definitely Ben McLemore is going to have to prove himself here in Summer League, not only as a starter for the Sacramento Kings, but even if he's worthy of remaining a Sacramento King, to be honest. He did have a very rough rookie season. And this has come from someone, I like Ben McLemore. I think he's a good kid. I think he works hard. He puts in good effort in practices and in games. It just hasn't, translated to any success so far in his career. But there's a possibility, man. I could definitely see Ben McLemore, the Kings using Summer League to showcase Ben McLemore and perhaps attach him to Jason Thompson or Carl Landry in the deal to maybe upgrade their front line or add depth elsewhere to their team. And by the way, my poster's falling in the background, so hey, it happens at times. We got these sets here, but it's okay. I had a feeling that would happen. But anyways, I do think that Ben McLemore is really fighting for his life here as a Sacramento King moving forward. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being dealt, if he's not dealt, before the season or even sometime this month or whatnot. It's a very, I think there's a very strong chance, a very strong possibility of that happening regardless of what the Sacramento Kings say about him and how much they like him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the Grantland video. One of the biggest things I took away actually came at the very end, and that's when Pete D'Alessandro was talking about, hey, yeah, we'll see if this is a good pick in 2 years. And when he was talking about Nick Stauskas, and this is going to be Ben McLemore's second year coming in, so that's why I feel maybe Ben is having a little bit more pressure on his shoulders this year, just to stay, like you said, a Sacramento King, or even just to be a starter on this team to really prove himself to be someone in this league. But let's move on now to Isaiah Thomas. There hasn't really been a lot going on. You heard that possible sign and trade deals with Pistons. You've heard the possibility of a sign and trade deal with Boston. And yet there hasn't been a lot since the NBA draft and, prior to like 2 weeks ago. What are you hearing about Isaiah Thomas? I mean, have the Kings really made a decision on whether or not they want to bring him back? Or, what's the feel out there about Isaiah Thomas?
I think there are strong indications from within the Kings that they are not going to re-sign him unless it is at their price range, which is somewhere maybe around $4 to $6 million. And honestly, if you think that Isaiah Thomas is only worth that much, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, because I think Isaiah Thomas is worth $7 to $8 million, maybe even $9 million a year. I think if somebody said to me, hey, would you sign Isaiah Thomas? Now, granted, I'm not a millionaire or a billionaire here, but if somebody asked me, would you sign Isaiah Thomas to a 4-year, $36 million deal for what he's able to do? Yeah, I would. I mean, you need to set aside the fact that he's 5'9". I mean, there are so many positive things that he does on the court. People think that he's selfish. Look at his assist percentage compared to Darren Collison last season. I mean, Isaiah Thomas had a 32% assist percentage versus Darren Collison, which was 21%. And people are saying that Darren Collison is more of a pass-first point guard than Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah is an underrated passer. I do think that there are issues where, his height does, restrict him in terms of his court vision. But, for all the things that he brings to the table, I keep him. If it's $11 million a year, I probably wouldn't retain him. But if it's 8, 9, I would probably keep him. And if the Kings can keep him at their price range of $4 to $6 million, then they are getting a huge deal. Regardless of where he's playing, if he's your starting point guard or he's your backup point guard, Isaiah Thomas is going to produce at a high level for the Sacramento Kings, and he's not a guy who's going to sulk. He's not a guy who's going to, let whether he comes off the bench or starts affects his play. He won't be happy about it. He'll be upset if he's coming off the bench for your team, but he'll play mad and he'll play angry, and that's what you need. He'll channel that energy into the right place and be a productive member for whatever team it is next year, whether it's the Sacramento Kings or the Los Angeles Lakers. I know Sacramento Kings fans don't want to hear that, but
Kings fans would hate to hear that.
It's a possibility, man. It's a strong possibility that he winds up with the Los Angeles Lakers next season. So, we'll see what happens. But for the most part, in terms of his front, it's been relatively quiet, and it's not surprising considering there's been a lot of waiting being done right now because of LeBron James. You're hearing reports today that Carmelo Anthony is deciding to re-sign with the New York Knicks, but hey, I mean, if Isaiah Thomas went to the Miami Heat and teamed up with LeBron James and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade, that would be a good look for his career. And if the Kings let him go, and he's starting for the Miami Heat on a potential championship contender, then I would start to question the Kings' evaluation of talent, because if the back-to-back Eastern Conference representatives in the NBA Finals over the last few years think that he's a starting point guard, why is it that a 28-win team doesn't think he's a starting point guard?
Yeah, so I want to ask you this year, because there has been so many reports of possible sign and trade deals. Do you possibly see anything happening, especially with so many rumors, going around, possibly about Rajon Rondo still? I mean, that rumor's been kind of floating around since last offseason. But what are your thoughts? Do you see possibly a Pistons sign and trade deal or a Rajon Rondo sign and trade deal with the Celtics even happening, or is it kind of we're gonna just see him walk away because the Kings just can't afford him?
I think they would work out a sign and trade with somebody. They probably won't get a lot in return. I think if you worked out a sign and trade with like the Miami Heat, I could see them getting Norris Cole back, but the Miami Heat actually isn't operating with cap room at this point, so I don't know if it's even possible to bring him in to Miami. But I could see sign and trades work out. Maybe Detroit. Detroit apparently is out of the running for him, reportedly. But I could definitely see there being interest there, and a swap with Josh Smith might make sense if you could pair Isaiah Thomas with an expiring contract like Jason Terry's to get Josh Smith here to Sacramento. But even then, if the Kings were bringing in a Josh Smith to the fold, Darren Collison, a lineup of Darren Collison, Nick Stauskas, Josh Smith, Rudy Gay, and DeMarcus Cousins is not a playoff team in the Western Conference.
It's not. It just doesn't seem like it would work, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think that would be enough. I mean, you gotta, and even with Boston, you look at Rajon Rondo. I don't think there's much interest there at this point because they've got a lot of guards. You have Rondo, you have Marcus Smart, you have Avery Bradley. And they also just brought in Marcus Thornton via trade. So they've got a lot of guards in Boston this upcoming season, so I don't really see how Isaiah Thomas could possibly yield you Rajon Rondo at this point.
All right, so before I get into fan questions, because I have a couple of fan questions here for the show, I kind of want to get your three keys for the summer league for fans to really keep a lookout while they're watching, not just player-wise, but three factors that the Kings you should really look for when the Kings are playing.
Well, for me, I'm really eager to see what Marshawn Brooks can do. That's a very interesting storyline. I think it'll float under the radar if he does get playing time for this team. Because, like I said, if he's able to show that he's better than their rookie shooting guard and their second-year shooting guard, then he can possibly carve out another opportunity for himself in the league. Derek Williams, watching what he does is going to be key. Him being on the summer league team, a former number 2 overall pick, in the 2011 draft. This is a big summer for him and a big offseason and a big season for him because he's coming to the end of his rookie contract. So you're going to want to see what he does and what he's developed since the season ended. Ray McCallum is another guy I want to see his improvement because, I start to wonder too, if you're bringing in Darren Collison, does any of that have to do with Ray McCallum's progress or how much you believe in him going into next year? And that's a lot to ask of a guy who was a second-round pick just last year in a draft that wasn't that great. But if they feel that highly and strongly about Ray McCallum that they would be willing to let Isaiah Thomas go, I'd be very interested to see what kind of skills and abilities Ray has developed, this offseason. And another thing to watch, obviously, is what moves do the Kings make. We've heard a lot about them being involved in trades leading up to the draft, and then nothing happens. And then we hear
that always happens.
Yeah, we hear stuff with sign and trades for this team, and nothing's happened thus far. So, the roster still needs some adjustments to be made. For me personally, I definitely can't really see a situation where Jason Thompson is back with this team next year, and if he is, I don't know if you're going to get anything out of him because I don't really think that Jason Thompson wants to be a Sacramento King anymore. So we'll see if they make moves within the next 10 days or the next 15 days. That'll be interesting to watch in Summer League in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I saw your guys' interview with Jason Thompson. I got that same feeling, like maybe the grass is greener on the other side, and maybe he is ready to transition into a different team. But now we're gonna get on a fan.
He's a good dude. He's a good dude too. I mean, he's a good guy. I think, he kind of is a scapegoat for fans, but he's a guy who the fans should know that Jason Thompson every year of his career has come in ready to play, and each time he comes in, the Kings bring in somebody to try and take his job. And when you've gone through that 6 straight seasons, it can wear on you, and you start to wonder if you're really wanted. So I don't blame Jason Thompson for not wanting to be here in Sacramento anymore if that is the case.
No, I understand exactly what you mean. I get that same feeling. There was that running joke is who are the Kings going to bring in for Jason Thompson to beat out again? Because he had to do it for 6 straight years, like you said. So it'll be interesting to see if he's on this to keep playing no matter what, even if he's on the team, and whether that means coming off the bench or as a starter. I just think he's ready for change, and I think maybe this team has been ready for change for a little while. But, all right, now we're going to move on to fan questions. If you have a question that you want to get on the show, you can email your questions to sknarticles@gmail.com, or you can tweet your questions into sknarticles at sknarticles, or myself at BM Center. And so the first question we have of the day comes from Connor Jackson, and Connor says, who would you start opening night at your shooting guard position for the Kings, Nick Stauskas or Ben McLemore?
Could you repeat that again? You're kind of breaking up there.
Oh, he said it came from Connor Jackson. He said, who would be your starter opening night at the shooting guard position, Nick Stauskas or Ben McLemore?
Boy, I'll have a clearer vision on that after Summer League, but based on what some people think of him within the Kings, I just wouldn't be surprised if Nick Stauskas is the starting shooting guard. He brings a little bit more to the table than Ben at this point. I mean, and again, I don't know if Ben improved his ball handling. We'll see. That's what we'll get to find out in Summer League. But as of right now, if we're looking at what they did last year in their respective situations, I think Nick Stauskas will probably be the starting shooting guard for the Sacramento Kings.
Definitely, I completely agree. Just because he brings that little bit more, whether that be ball handling, and I can't remember the website that posted it, but I think they showed the shooting charts between both Ben McLemore and Nick Stauskas, and as of now, Nick Stauskas actually is the better shooter. I can't remember what site that was on, but I know I saw like a chart graph, and they were kind of comparing the two, and Nick Stauskas was actually the better shooter. But next question comes from Christian Fasundo. He said, what are your realistic expectations for DeMarcus Cousins this upcoming season in terms of stats technicals, maturity, and accolades, whether that be the NBA All-Star team or All-NBA?
Well, the tough thing for DeMarcus is always going to be he'll get the accolades and he'll get the recognition when the team starts doing well. And as of right now, I don't think that this team is good enough for him, to make the All-Star team. I thought he was an All-Star last year based on his talent and production alone, but unfortunately, based on who picks the All-Star teams, they didn't see that. They weren't going to give it to him based on, individual production, so to speak. As far as maturity, I think it's good to see that he's coming out and working with the young guys at Summer League right now. He's taking part in workouts in their mini camps in Las Vegas. So that's a good sign of progress. He was here in Sacramento late last month working out with some of the guys. So he's starting to make strides in that area. Now, is he going to be the Mr. Personable with the media? No, he's not. But I think as long as he's personable with his teammates and he gets along with his teammates and he communicates well with his teammates and his coaches, then it doesn't matter if he's nice to media or not, to be quite honest. So as far as production, I think he's just going to keep getting better. He had the best season of his career last year statistically, and to me he is arguably a top 3, if not the best big man in the league at this point in terms of what he can bring on the court. So he's a very good player. It's just a matter of whether or not he can keep it all together. And technical fouls, that's a tough one because there are times where his reputation precedes him and he doesn't deserve to get teed up. But obviously, that's a bet he made for himself in the past. As much as he doesn't like to hear it, that history does play a role in terms of perception, and especially perception in the minds of officials. So I can't really say how many.
I was going to say, and yeah, that history has been following him around since college of getting technical fouls, arguing with coaches, and stuff like that. And okay, so our last question comes from Let's Go Sack, and he says, we've kind of touched on this question a little bit already, but if you had to guess where Isaiah Thomas ends up, where would you guess he would go, and what are some potential sign and trade pieces that this Kings team has?
Man, at this point, gosh, I don't know. I could definitely see something with, right now I'll say the Lakers and the Mavericks are 2 potential destinations for him. And if he's going to the Mavericks, they did just sign Chandler Parsons to an offer sheet, so I'd have to double check whether or not they even have the room to re-sign him. But if they did, I could definitely see the Kings working out some sort of sign and trade where they acquire maybe Brandon Wright in the deal. He fits the mold for what the Kings front office brass is looking for. He's a long, rangy big man, and in fact, Pete D'Alessandro and Chris Mullin drafted him in Golden State. So I could see that being a possibility with the Dallas Mavericks, and I could see him going to Los Angeles as well. It's just that we're waiting to see what happens here with Carmelo Anthony. Again, reports are that he's going to stay, but it's possible that Isaiah winds up in Los Angeles. And man, if he wound up in Los Angeles, I guarantee you, the 4 times a year that the Kings play the Lakers, Isaiah Thomas will have those games circled on his list and on his calendar, and he will go out and do whatever he can to purposely destroy the Sacramento Kings on the court.
Do you think that he would get more boos than Spencer Hawes if he goes to the Lakers?
No, I don't think he should. Honestly, if fans boo him, I would kind of shake my head at that. Fans shouldn't boo Thomas if he goes to the Los Angeles Lakers. If anything, they should boo the front office for not matching an offer sheet on him because he wants to stay in Sacramento. It's much like the Tyreke Evans situation. That guy wanted to stay in Sacramento. The Kings had a price. They weren't willing to go over that price to retain him, and he left Sacramento and ended up a New Orleans Pelican. So the same situation here for Isaiah Thomas. If the Kings do have the opportunity to match any offer that he signs, and if they decide, if this guy is making $7 million annually a year or $8 million annually a year, and that's too rich for us, then I think the Kings fans should probably be upset with the management for letting him go, and not for him making a decision that, betters his family, because he's earned it. I mean, he's a guy who's a 60th pick in the draft, and he deserves this big payday. And whether it comes from the Sacramento Kings, the Los Angeles Lakers, or anybody else, is regardless.
Definitely, he's made pennies compared to what some of these players have made in the league already because he was the last pick in the draft. But before I sign out on this show, I want to give a shout out because I didn't do it on the last episode. And his screen name is Kings All Day. So Kings All Day. There you go. There's your shout out. John, thanks for joining the show. Where can people find you online?
You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/itsjon Santiago. Follow us on our Cowbell Kingdom account, Cowbell_Kingdom. Also follow James, my partner James Ham, on Twitter, twitter.com/James_Ham. And like us on Facebook too, Cowbell Kingdom on Facebook.
Definitely. Also, you guys go check out their YouTube channel. It's Cowbell Kingdom. Their YouTube, their podcast is awesome. They have a great intro. They have great guests go on there all the time. I listen to your guys' podcast every Friday. So go hit that subscribe button. Also, everyone go follow me on Twitter as well. I'm at VMCenter, which is twitter.com/VMCenter. And also subscribe, hit the like button down there below, just to let us know here at SatKingsNation.com, Fansided.com, and GoldenGateSports.com that you all enjoyed and liked this episode, and it just really helps us out to know to keep improving. So yeah, John, again, thanks for joining the show. Can't wait. Hopefully we can have you on again. And yeah, until next time, Kings fans, bye-bye.